In this video, we continue our conversation with board game designer Volko Ruhnke about his upcoming design Drachen. It will be Volume 2 in the Recon series of games and is a unique model of how reconnaissance played a key role in World War I trench warfare. This is Legendary Tactics. And so, I mean, obviously you've done a ton of research for this, but is there anything that the game taught you that you were maybe some lessons or some insights that you gained from the game itself when the model kind of took shape? Was there anything that you came away with that was a lesson or something surprising?
Yeah, so one thing that I mentioned, which is a kind of a dynamic that emerged, and I think is true, but I hadn't thought of, and this does happen a lot when you model something, was this idea that these decisive air groups that the French figured out how to use, and then the Germans used, that they should be a drain on the overall number of airplanes you've got available.
Mm.
So in the beginning of the offensive, the Germans did these barrier patrols I mentioned, where they actually tried to keep fighter patrols all the time. I presume this was in daylight. So the Germans in the beginning of the battle, in the preparation for their initial push, maintained constant barrier patrols to keep the French out. It was successful, but it used up a lot of machines. They couldn't sustain that. And that was before these group patrols. And the group patrols, then I theorize, if you're concentrating more aircraft in a given spot, yes, they're more effective. They're going to win an engagement against a smaller group or against a singleton, but that uses up again more of your planes. And then that has to, with the attrition of the battle, you have to bump into eventually problems with that, where we'd like to do that, but we can't in all cases send these more effective larger groups or escorts for our observers because we don't have enough airframes, or we're the ones suffering more attrition of airframes. So the game, produced that, right? Or led to that dynamic that I think is right. I hope so. It seems inescapable, but I hadn't thought of, before. So that's kind of an example. Another, I guess, is, of course, that's not the only reconnaissance going on. The other reconnaissance on the ground is trench raids. And so how does that fit in? And this was just something. So trench raids was another one of these, phenomena I didn't quite get from history. So because it's kind of crazy if you think about it. So there's it looks like a very nifty, I haven't played it, solitaire game out now about doing trench raids.
Yes, with Compass Games. Yeah, I've covered it on
Yep.
the channel. It's brutal. You
Is
send
it?
10
Yeah.
guys out
Okay.
across into no man's
Well,
land and
it should be brutal
yeah.
because, I mean, think about it, right? Here we are in this world where we've got complete, advantage of the defense tactically. And we have to amass lots and lots of guns, pound the enemy, and then send waves of troops over. And we're just going to take horrendous casualties, but it's the only way that we can, make progress. And the defender, if he survives the guns, which typically they did, they're sitting there happy behind their machine gun. And you know what I'm saying? It's like, who do you want to be? The attacker or the defender in that situation. So that's our situation. But now we're not going to, and this is an attrition war, by the way. Whichever one of us runs out of men first loses the war, right? So we're trying to conserve our losses, right? That's what you do in an attrition war. Okay, so here we are in this dominance of the defense. We're on the front line. It's not an offensive attrition war. We're trying to conserve losses. And my commander is telling me I get out of my trench. I go through my own wire. I crawl across no man's land. I cut through your wire and into your trench where all of your guys are. That's what I'm supposed to do. Why the heck am I doing that? Why am I, I'm going to get killed. Why are trench raids? But trench raids are very common, right? And you're throwing specialized troops out. You're training teams to be able to do this well. I mean, these are probably your most endeavoring soldiers, right? That you're sending over possibly to be killed or captured. So why are they doing that? It didn't make sense to me from an attrition point of view. Now there's some morale issues that go to that, like we want to, show that we can punch the enemy in the nose or something like that. But they're doing that to do things like take a prisoner, so they can see from the prisoners' shoulder boards, what division is opposite us or something like that, right? So reconnaissance is a big part of why these brutal, as you put it, because in real life, I think they were brutal. These brutal, but ultimately, I mean, very sophisticated operations. I mean, the way these trench raids were planned and everything, the sides got good at doing it because it was important to do. And it was important to do because that was yet another avenue of intelligence collection, of reconnaissance. So in Drachen, you've got the other cup. There's the Air Missions Cup. The other Chitful Cup is the Trench Raid Cup. And there's sort of an additional endeavor you can do or not if you want. And that is some trench raids. But then I had to kind of think about, well, what do you get from that? What do you get from trench raids that you can't get from just having a balloon up in the air? That's rather safer, I think,
Yeah, a little bit.
yeah, or flying observer aircraft over the enemy line. What are the trench raids? So the trench raids are not going to spot for your artillery, right? They're not doing that. They're going in, they're rummaging around, and they're coming back with stuff and people, if they're successful. What can you get from that? So I had to think about what kind of information. This isn't something that I had not read about, it not occurred to me. I had to kind of think through and do my own, to some degree, surmise. I mean, I read the histories of some trench raids and what the techniques were and that sort of thing. What are they getting from that? And they're getting some more detailed information. And this is like different kinds of intelligence, right? This is true of, if you have signals intelligence and imagery intelligence and open source intelligence, human intelligence, a human agent gives you different kinds of information than photographs from a satellite, right? This is akin to that. And so in the game, first of all, the trench raid, of course, is only giving you stuff that's pretty close to the trenches. Where a balloon can see miles behind the front line. An aircraft can fly and photograph miles behind the front line. The trench raid is getting some information about the trenches right in front of you, but it's information you can't see through binoculars, right? It's information like the identity of the unit, the layout and density of the wire field, and what it seemed to me, if you were really lucky and effective, documents. And those documents can tell you any of a number of things. They can be more detailed information about the layout, for example. They might be information about intentions, right? Documents may include plans or information that is reflective of plans that tells you an enemy intention, right? Which might be harder to get from just photographing a trench system, for example, right? So in Drachen, the trench raids give you some local information. You can look at some blocks in front of you. But if you push your luck and you are successful enough, and this represents bringing back documents, plans, you get to look at your enemy's objectives. Well, and one of your enemy's objectives. So Drachen uses a very simple, relative to Coast Watchers, very simple victory calculation. Each side draws randomly or semi-randomly 3 objective cards. And they're objectives like take an enemy fort or kill more soldiers than you lose or whatever. Various things that you're trying, your side might be trying to achieve during this next push, whether you're the attacker or the defender. So anyway, you get 3 of these hidden cards and you can see what your objectives are. Your enemy has 3 cards. You don't know what your opponent's objectives are. Whichever of you achieves more of your 3 objective cards wins the game. Very simple. Yeah, wouldn't you like to know what those cards are on the other
Yeah,
side, right? So that's something that your air missions are not going to bring you, but your trench raids just might.
that's interesting. Wow. Yeah, because I always wondered, even playing the game Trent Trade, I'm like, why would anyone do this?
Why would
Especially if
anyone
you're,
do this? Right. It
yeah,
must have been it must have been damned important. And
yeah.
indeed it was. Um, uh, and operationally, I think I can see how tactically it would be important to keep the enemy on edge, try to wear down his morale, and keep your own guys from just getting, bored from just sitting there all the time and doing nothing,
Yeah.
but suffering in
Yeah.
these awful conditions, right? You want to be hitting the enemy. You have to maintain expensive spirit. And the trench raid is one way to do that. And I get that.
Yeah.
But in terms of operationally affecting the situation, the trench raids had to be very important for gaining that special kind of information, even if it was right, it was close to you geographically, but it was a special kind of information that your airplanes and your balloons could not give you.
So I've got a couple more questions. What was the biggest design challenge for you with Drachen? What was the thing that was the trickiest or maybe some of it came together very easily, but there's always that one thing.
Yeah. So you say that in the past tense, and I'm gonna say that the game is still in test and development. In fact,
Okay.
quite active. There's going to
Okay.
be a test tonight, even on Tabletop Simulator and Discord. Um, so the challenges remain, the challenges remaining, and I think the greatest single challenge is yet to be, which is how will we deliver a solitaire experience that is worthy of
Mm,
putting in the box.
yeah.
Okay. So I believe we have done that with Coast Watchers. That's now set a bar, and I'm confident we will get there. But no doubt there will be many challenges involved, yet to be seen in doing that. So that's probably when I look back, I forecast, I'll say, well, that was the biggest challenge was how to get that to work well. However, up until now, I would say that the testing and the development and the tweaking and everything, um, some games are brittle and some are not. This is a matter of, is it a stable or unstable equilibrium? And with Verdun, um, we're talking about a lot of stuff, a lot of guns and men in a small place. And you're trying to be the first one to see what's where to suppress it or kill it. And we're only going to do one, we're going to play out one push. And, who wins that game may well come down to one deterministic calculation of whether a given position falls or not. Okay. So that's pretty brittle, right? And so I think a challenge has been and will continue to be to make sure across 8 different situations spanning the overall battle, because you're playing like a few weeks of time, a couple of weeks of time to prelude to a push within the larger Battle of Verdun, right? From February to December 1916, you're playing March or something like that, right? Okay. And the situation changes, and sometimes the French are attacking, and sometimes the German, and there are going to be different assets like those French anti-balloon rockets that come into play or not, and all these sorts of things. Anyway, the map is different because the front line has changed. Different observation posts, different prominent hills and forts now belong to the other side, and so on. The core system has to deliver a balanced game across all those situations, and it shouldn't come down to just, oh well, I shot down this one balloon, I was successful, I was lucky, and now that's it, game over, I'm going to win, right?
Yeah.
So it's the tuning. It's like building the thing is the easy part, right? building building the harpsichord, I should say, from a kit sounds hard, but there's a whole nother skill to making it sound good when you play it, the tuning of it, right? And we're in the throes of that now. And fortunately, I've got a crew from Coast Watchers and elsewhere. Coast Watchers is, I mean, it's fully development's done. No testing's occurring. It's just a matter of getting the art finished up so we can print the thing, right? Um, so those happily, some of those folks have migrated over to Drachen, and we're now putting it through its paces, and that's tightening the bolt. So, but that's the challenge I think there is that with such a simple victory assessment, 3 different concrete objectives that are random or semi-random, which three it is on each side, and then just achieving more of those three than your opponent, with a deterministic combat system that follows on positioning by the player, because where you put your forces and guns and balloons and stuff is very, very important. So there's a lot of agency there for the players, how they do that, and then how they run the reconnaissance battle before you do the simple deterministic, does the infantry push succeed question, right? That's a lot of moving parts to get to a very contained, simple, deterministic, I win, you know,
Yeah.
make sure that that is a good play experience across sessions. That takes a lot of ingenuity, I would say, and work.
Hmm. And aside from the lesson of the deterministic nature of the combat part and so forth, what's what's important to you for players to experience? Like when this gets published and to the table and so forth, what do you want for the players to take away as an experience overall?
Fear. Um, it's very comfortable when you're looking at all your units spread across your front line, and you see the enemy's front line, and you see the enemy's units, and you know what 3-1 odds are capable of and 2-1 odds are capable of, you know, and you know how fast everybody can move. You just have a lot of knowledge. But I'm not the person who said this first. The essence of military command is the management of uncertainty. And if you think about a mass of soldiers getting ready to charge over the top, and they're like bunched together because you're going to send a lot of guys at once forward, let's say, or they're further behind the line, they're your counterattack force if you're the defender. Or you think about artillery guns, they've got some fortification, but there's a bunch of guns. These are delicate pieces of equipment, really, and there's piles of shells all around them. Okay. You know, a well-placed artillery volley can really mess that picture up badly, right? So you do what you can to fortify, to dig in, to protect yourself. But it's really important that the enemy not know where those concentrations are until it's too late, right? Okay. Now, with the way that this game and the Recon series uses blocks, not only do you not know what your enemy has where for you to shoot at and what can shoot at you, you also don't even know necessarily what your enemy knows. If a balloon, you see a balloon there, there's the enemy's observation balloon, it's a couple miles behind the front. You've tried to shoot it down, you failed. It's there. There's a guy in that balloon. He's got binoculars, he's got his telephone cable down to the ground, and he is watching you. Where is he looking?
Yeah, you don't know.
Who knows?
Yeah,
Yeah, he could be looking 15 miles out if the weather's good. So who knows? What does the enemy already know about you? How vulnerable are you right now? What of yours is about to be blasted? And what then should you reveal? Like, let's say you've now got a target. Okay, here's this little target over here. And do you reveal your guns to go blast that target? Or if you do, are you about to be pounded? Right. So so that's kind of the sensation that I feel is, you know, takes us to, I hate to use the word realistic for a board game compared to real
yeah,
life trench warfare. Okay. But that taps into something that surely the decision makers in trench warfare had to feel, that because uncertainty was so great. And the difference between knowing or not knowing this one thing, like where is that enemy battery, is huge. It's life or death, perhaps. It might be success or failure for that offensive, depending on how well, right, your reconnaissance has turned up what the enemy really has got and where, right? Okay. So that's a very different, I think, a very different way, for me anyway, to think about the visceral experience of trench battle. Now, at the operational level, right? I'm not talking about now the infantrymen, defending the trench or going over the top. I'm talking at the operational level of those commanders, division and so forth. Okay. Viscerally, we have this idea that, well, it's all pretty staid, we sit here in these trenches, we're going to be here 4 years, every once in a while they send a wave of guys over, we shoot them down with machine guns, we throw a bunch of artillery shells at them, then we go over it. You know what I'm saying? It seems kind of, you know, like there's not a lot of finesse in that. Once you introduce the idea of the uncertainty and the importance of uncertain reconnaissance struggle into the success, I think you start to see all the dynamism in that situation. And that leads you to experimentation and innovation that's born of that fear, right? We come up with cool ideas like putting rockets on airplanes because we have to, because if we don't shoot those German balloons down, we're going to die, right? So that's what fear as a route to kind of tapping into the subtle complexity going on, even when the front line hasn't moved for several months. That doesn't mean nothing complicated or sophisticated or intense isn't happening there. It is happening. And so I think the great trench warfare games show us something dynamic and exciting. It doesn't have to be that the front line moved 100 miles because a panzer division punched through or something like that. It's not that, on the game table, the illusion of movement, as Richard Berg put it, that's giving you the excitement. There's other dynamics in there. And I hope Drachen brings some of those out as other great trench warfare games have.
I'm really looking forward. I did see this demoed at Fort Circle 2024. You were demoing this back then, and it seemed to be at the time more or less completed design, but I guess there's been a lot of work that's gone into it since.
Yeah, and I mean, since then, I've spent a lot of time on Coast Watchers, of course, and some on, getting Blackbeard art ready and other things as well. I've got another design for Phalanx Race to Rabal that's on the way. So I've been doing other things as well. But now that Coast Watchers is essentially, all but in the can, there's a little bit of solitaire related art yet to proof and complete. But the development is done. I'm turning back to Drachen, with vigor, and yeah, I'm continuing to. I mean, the air resolution system has changed in recent weeks. Um, Certainly, the scenarios, the situations, the scenarios are going to continue to be tweaked as we try them and find that, yeah, this one isn't really, whatever, this one isn't really fair to the Germans or whatever it is that we discover.
And it must be good as well to take a bit of a break from a design, work on something else, and then come back with a bit of a fresh perspective on things, so you're not quite as
Yeah,
wound up in the details.
and you've learned stuff in the meantime,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Although that can be
absolutely.
deadly because then you're like, we got to redo this whole thing. It's
Well, but this is the thing, so like how deep is the surgery? That's
yeah.
another aspect of it because everything has ripple effects it's a complex system, these
Yeah.
games, right? And so, yeah, oh, well, we'll just make this one card more powerful. And all the little the dominoes fall, and now you've got all kinds of other things happening. And that's part of what does make it complicated to
Yes.
you know to get the thing into harmony.
And hopefully you don't discover when it gets released into the wild that there's this way to break the game, the Halifax hammer type
Right. Yeah.
thing.
No, you don't want that.
No.
Yeah, you don't want that.
No, that's great. Well, thanks for sharing your insights. I'm really excited for this one. And would you have any idea what sort of timeline, or is it all still up in the air?
Yeah, I don't it's so hard to say. It's very fraught because I will tell you I really was expecting Coast Watchers to have reached market this year.
Hmm.
But there are so many, I mean, there are just so many links in the chain,
Mm.
intellectual and logistical and personnel wise. And Coast Watchers is a big package from an art perspective, including the solitaire materials. I mean, it's got entirely separate solitaire system for each side because the sides are asymmetrical.
Yeah.
So that not only took a lot of time to design and develop, but the art for that, is still underway,
Yeah.
this late in the year.
Yeah.
And I mean, it'll be worth it in the end, and no lives will have been lost, whatever. It'll get there, but it'll keep, I guess. But for that's just one example of I probably shouldn't make any
Yeah,
forecasts,
fair enough.
right? Because who knows? And I will say honestly, it doesn't all depend on us. It doesn't just depend on the design and development team or the artists or on GMT's production decisions. They are committed to their P500 system with very good corporate stability reasons.
Hmm.
And, you know, I mean, Drachen I don't know, it's not even broken 500, I don't think. And why not? I like to tell myself it's because, well, it's volume two and nobody's seen volume one.
Yeah,
So,
well, I think that's
you
part of
know,
it.
well, why should I sign up for volume two? Because they are related. They're pretty closely related mechanically, right? So there's a good chance that if you did not enjoy Coast Watchers, that you're probably not going to enjoy Drachen, you know, and we haven't gotten volume one to market. So, but then I don't know what will happen. What will the reception be for volume one? What impact will that have on pre-orders for Drachen? That's all uncertainties in the future that will have a decisive impact on how quickly. I mean, I have to hope the thing will get made. It will get made, Drachen, but how quickly really depends on how strong does the demand in the market appear to be, and the main metric of that is the P500 numbers.
Mhm. Yeah, and Ghost Watchers is just over 1,000. So
Oh, is
that's,
it?
yeah.
Oh, well, I'm delighted because I think the last time I saw it, it was 999. So yay. Wonderful. Well, thank you for the support for that. Yeah. So yeah, so 1,000 folks have said, well, all right, we'll risk it and have a look at volume one. It's worth a look. But why would you say the same for volume two? This coming later. I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, most people wouldn't and haven't, which is as one would expect. So we're going to see how does volume one do, and we will be, I think the design and development, I do feel like it was performing well even at two circle DCs ago. I was happy with it. I was happy with what it was doing. We've tightened the bolts further, and we're going to continue to do that, and we're going to provide a solitaire experience. So I'm pretty well determined that none of that will be the long pole in the tent. You know,
Mhm.
the question is, to assign an artist, because GMT has to pay artists, to assign an artist and contract an artist, they want to know they have a market for that game. So they're
Mhm.
going to be looking at the P500 numbers, not only for when do we print and how many do we print, but when
Yeah.
do we even start art, right?
Yeah.
So, and I just don't, we just don't have that information.
Yes.
But my determination is it's not going to be the case that GMT says, "Oh, we have an artist for you," and I'm like, "Oh gosh, the development isn't ready." No, I'm determined not to find myself in that situation. I want to be able to say, I hope I will be able to say, when the numbers justify hiring an artist to start work on Drachen, we're ready for art.
Well, thanks again. I really appreciate you taking the time, and it's always good to hear from you and to hear what you're most excited about. That's what I think is the most fun for me. I'm sure it's the same for the audience, is just the excitement. You're like a little kid who's just like, oh, I just love
Well, I
this.
am. I am. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me back, and thanks for the conversation, Nate. I really enjoyed it.